The reeds whisper, water moves with a slow, patient noise. A gloved hand parts the woven twigs of a beaver dam, and there, caught in the woody mesh, is a loop of frayed cord, salted with mud, sunlight catching a single leather tab. Listen closely. The river keeps what we lose.
I'm Sam Nang. Find somewhere dark and quiet. Put your headphones on and listen closely now. Tonight's story is called Beaver Ledger. We move slowly through water and time, tracking what a living engineer collects, and asking a hard question. When does a natural archive become evidence?
The person at the center of this story is a volunteer named Mara. She spends her mornings in muddy waders, checking culverts and clearing invasive knots of plastic from drainage corridors. A conservationist by trade, she knows the language of reed and root. The creek she monitors is small, narrow enough to step across in 2 strides most summers, but living in it are beavers, quiet engineers that turn flowing water into a workshop and, as it turns out, an accidental ledger.
Beaver dams are not just piles of sticks. They are living, adaptive structures. They trap branches, sediment, seeds, and anything the current carries. A plastic tag, a length of rope, a leather strap. These items get woven in, preserved by anaerobic, wet conditions. Mara knows this. She knows you don't pry at a dam. You observe, you photograph, you timestamp. You do not remove.
The first strange event happened on a dull, gray morning. Light rain. Mara lifts her headlamp to peer under a low cedar arch and finds a familiar pattern. Frayed cord, then a short loop of worn leather, then a small partial tag, all tangled in the same sequence across a gap in the woven sticks. She takes a photo, notes the time, records the weather. She does not touch the dam. She sends the photo to the local wetlands group with a note. Interesting snag. Looks like previous finds.
At first, it is a curiosity. At first, people say, it's the current, it's coincidence, it's trash. And yet, over weeks, over muddy mornings and afternoon checks, the same assemblage reappears downstream. Not a single fluke, but a pattern. Cord, leather, tag, repeated across 3 dams in roughly the same spatial order. Someone draws a line on a map. The line runs near an old search perimeter, an archival case file from years ago about a disappearance that never closed.
Here's where the story deepens. It would have been easy to spin a headline. Animal evidence points to route. But Mara, thoughtful and careful, did the opposite. She paused. She reached out to experts. She knew a wetland is an interpreter and a filter. What it preserves is biased by hydraulics and behavior. So we asked 3 kinds of people for help. A wetland ecologist to explain the beaver's construction and drift bias, a materials conservator to talk about non-invasive imaging and what can be read from embedded objects, and a search and rescue coordinator to say when such finds merit official action.
The wetland ecologist, soft-spoken, exact, told us this. Beavers construct with intent. They brace, they layer, they respond to water pressure. Items caught in a dam are not randomly archived like objects in a landfill. There is a bias. He explained drift sorting. Certain sizes and materials are preferentially trapped at certain points in the weave. He told me, if you find similar objects repeatedly, consider hydrology first. Where does the current slow? Where does flow separate? The animals are creating predictable traps. The materials conservator, bright lamp, careful hands and gloves, spoke to what can be learned without cutting open the dam. Non-invasive imaging, she said, can reveal layers, the order items arrived, how long they might have been exposed, whether metal corrosion or biological growth has started. But she warned, wetland conditions are messy. Textile fibers can fuse with plant matter. Tags can be partially eaten by microbes. Her advice was clear. Document, but don't extract. Extraction can destroy context that tells the story.
And the search and rescue coordinator, practical, brisk, laid down a threshold. For SAR teams to act, evidence needs a chain of custody or a high-confidence link. A partial tag is promising, but on its own it is probabilistic. He said, "We respect volunteers. We need corroboration. Multiple, consistent finds, corroborated by records, and ideally something that can tie to known identifiers. Above all, do not disturb a scene. Contamination kills investigations." All three answers fold together like layers in a wetland cross-section. Beavers bias capture, materials can be read without destruction, and investigators need chain of custody. Armed with those cautions, Mara and the volunteers plotted the finds. They mapped them without pinning precise coordinates for public eyes. They compared timestamps, water levels, and weather logs. They looked for a pattern that survived alternative explanations: seasonal shifts, high flow events, even scavenger activity that might transport items unpredictably.
Weeks passed. The pattern held. The partial tag, small stamped letters, matched a vendor who no longer operated in the nearby town, a company long dissolved. Paper trails were thin. Files in a dusty office hinted at a long, cold search perimeter, the public record of a person who vanished years ago along a route that could fit our corridor. This was the point where the finding moved from curiosity to responsibility. This is the moment. The fear takes hold, and the decision arrives.
Mara, with a trembling steadiness, did the right thing. She contacted local conservation officers and the regional SAR coordinator. She handed over her documentation, photos with timestamps, careful notes on environmental conditions, and a statement of what she had not done. No touching, no breaching, no removal. The SAR team arranged a daylight, controlled inspection. They made a plan that would avoid disturbing the TAMs. High-resolution photography from stable, non-invasive angles. Loose, movable debris collected only if it lay freely outside dam structures. And consultations with the conservator before any handling.
The field test, the controlled inspection, felt like a careful surgical procedure on a living thing. Professionals arrived with training and restraint. They photographed from the same angles Mara had. They used non-contact imaging where possible and logged everything. When they collected loose material, silted rope fragments that lay in the shallows, not woven into the dam, they bagged and labeled them in the presence of a conservation officer and recorded chain of custody notes. Nothing dramatic unfolded in a single moment. The climax here is procedural, method over melodrama. The hope was in method. Analysis followed. Laboratory imaging suggested the leather strap had been exposed to water for years. The corroded fragments matched a production window consistent with the vendor document. But the experts, again, pushed back against a neat narrative. The ecologist reminded us that floods can rearrange material in surprising ways. The conservator pointed out that fiber fusion complicates dating. The SAR coordinator said, "We have a lead, yes, but it is only a lead. We proceed with humility."
The family's perspective mattered most. When the team approached the relatives of the long missing person, they did so with care. They explained probabilistic language, what suggestive means, what inconclusive means. This is where empathy matters. Facts are not comfort, but transparency is a courtesy. The family was given options: request further testing, wait for corroborating evidence, or archive the finds with authorities while investigations continued. There was no cinematic breakthrough, no single aha moment to relieve months of grief. There was a long, careful conversation and a promise to keep them informed.
Aftermath felt quiet and complicated.
Agencies tempered public statements, preferring caution over sensational headlines. Some in the volunteer community pushed for more aggressive searching. Others urged patience. The message from professionals was consistent. Wetlands are biased recorders. The beavers remember in their own way, and that memory is shaped by water, by seasons, and by animal behavior. Reading what the wetland remembers requires both wonder and humility.
There is one image I keep coming back to. On a late autumn evening, a lamplit bench by the marsh, Mara spreads her field notebook open. In the fading light, she traces the line on her map, 3 points along a reed-choked corridor. She holds up a photograph, a single woven strap, its leather dark and exact, threaded through willow and moss. It's beautiful. It's evocative. It points, gently, toward questions that cannot be answered at the bench. Notice the silence. The night remembers, but it does not speak plainly.
Before I close, there are practical things to say, clear, explicit, and necessary. If you find something like this in the wild, do not touch the dam. Do not pry or remove woven items. Photograph from a safe distance with timestamps, note weather, and general non-GPS descriptors like North Bank, second culvert upstream of the footbridge, and report your find to local conservation officers, park rangers, or accredited SAR teams. If you are a volunteer, work through official channels. This is not about guarding secrets. It's about protecting potential evidence and protecting fragile habitats.
We also need to be honest about limits. A repeating assemblage in beaver dams can be suggestive, but it is not a map on its own. Hydraulics, animal behavior, and seasonal drift all complicate interpretation. Experts will temper eagerness with probabilities. That's science working as prudence, hypotheses, not headlines. That restraint is not frustration, it's responsibility. So where does this leave us? The corridor remains a corridor, suggestive, unresolved, and handled with care. The team continues to monitor, the family continues to hope, and the beavers continue their quiet engineering, collecting, sorting, preserving in ways that will outlast us. This is no coincidence, but it is also not a complete answer. The natural world keeps records in languages we are still learning to read.
If this story stayed with you, do one small thing. Respect the places and processes that preserve traces. Photograph, document, and report. Don't reconstruct. And if you volunteer in wetlands, keep meticulous notes and work with accredited partners. The living workshop of a wetland must be read with humility, not headlines.
I'm Sam Nang. If Beaver Ledger stayed with you, subscribe so you never miss an episode. Share this with someone who thinks the wild is only beautiful. Invite them to see the other side too. For resources, we include anonymized contacts for regional wetland ecologists, conservation officers, and accredited SAR groups in the episode notes. And one last reminder, do not touch or dismantle dams. Photograph, timestamp, and contact professionals.
Find a quiet place tonight and think of the woven strap in the dam, the way water preserves and erases at once. Until next time, check the corners.